Hi, and welcome to another episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. Now, this episode is a little bit different because I'm talking to a really good friend of mine, but I'm talking to her about her profession, her job as an educator. So we're talking all things education, but this is just not a light, fluffy talk about, what school's like and stuff. This is going to be a bit of a deep dive into what's wrong with the system and what we can do to fix the system, okay? There's a big ideas, big concepts. Now, this is a good friend of mine, Tracey Jacobsen. I went to high school with her many, many years ago. We won't say how many. And she's been teaching for about 20 years. She was the head of pastoral care at St. George's College in Perth. And her family did the whole pre-change thing, moved from Perth to Tasmania. And now she's teaching year 11 and 12 at the Indy School, which is part of a whole network of schools around Australia. And then they specialise in kids that may have fallen through the cracks at normal, everyday government schools and stuff like that. So they very different teaching model. So Tracey's teaching there at the moment. But she's been head of pastoral care, I said before. She's been in middle school, all that sort of stuff. So she's taught for 20 years, and she's got some big ideas about education. And I think a lot of teachers and other educators that I know will enjoy watching this, may or may not agree, but it's based around a talk that she did, which was she gave a talk to the National Youth Commission. I want to make sure I get it right, last year. So I wanted to ask her a few questions about the talk that she gave. So stand by. Let's all sit down, pour a glass of wine, and let's watch me talk to Tracey Jacobsen and get to know her a little bit more and her views on education. Tracey Jacobsen, welcome to my little chat show. How are you going?
I'm well, thanks, Josh. How are you?
I'm good. Now, look, in the introduction, I spoke about how, you and I are great friends. We went to high school. We've been friends ever since. We talked about your history as a teacher in education, a little bit about where you've taught and as the pastoral care person at St. George's College. And now you find yourself in a completely different school. Okay, it's the Indy School. That's in Hobart, isn't it?
Well, yes. There's actually Indy schools all over the place, and in fact, there's one opening in Perth in the next year or so.
Okay,
but
can you just?
I'm at is in Hobart. Yeah.
Okay, can you just briefly explain what's different about Indy School?
Okay. So we cater to students aged from 15 to 19 who are disengaged from mainstream education. So if you can fit in and work well in a mainstream school, then we don't take students in who can. We take in students who've been out of the education system so I teach a couple of year 11 kids who haven't actually been in school properly since they were in year 6 or 7.
Wow.
So as you can imagine, the level that they're at is really low. And it's, we've got kids from all sorts of backgrounds. Some of our kids are there just because they have some sort of diagnosis that means that they learn differently. Some students are with us because of, family traumas that have disrupted their education. Some of our kids are there because of, mental health issues and anxiety issues that make studying in a mainstream school really difficult for them because of the pace and the size and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, and we do things pretty differently.
Okay, and obviously the school finds success by doing things differently?
Yes, but we have a very different way of thinking about success. Success is such an individual thing, and that's actually one of the problems with mainstream education is that success is judged according to whether you get a good ATAR or whether you get A's and B's, that sort of thing. Some of our students are very capable, but for whatever reason, they're never going to find that sort of success. Some of our students aren't capable of that kind of success because of their life circumstances. But do they find success? Absolutely. We've got kids who hadn't attended school for 2 years before coming to us, and they now attend school every day. That's success. So it looks differently.
It's redefining it, isn't it? Redefining whatever the measurement we have. Now, because this is all
Yep.
about education and smart stuff, I've got some notes here, okay? So I'm going to go very slowly,
Okay.
and you pick me up if I get anything wrong, because I think what you've got to say is quite important. And I know that a lot of other teachers or people in education out there will kind of resonate with what you're talking about and what I'm going to elaborate on in a minute, because
Yep.
everyone
And
that
some
I
will
see,
disagree with me as well.
I'm sure some of them do, but a lot of the people, a lot of the teachers and educators that I know, that I'm either friends with or friends on Facebook or whatever, because obviously I get to know a lot because I go into schools quite often, mainly
Absolutely.
primary schools, and I know you have a big focus on high school, but I think it can be like an across the board kind of thing. And a
Mm,
lot of them,
mm,
there's this sort of underlying frustration with the system itself, and the
yep.
fact that it's a one size fits all, and every student is not a one size fits all
Mm,
student,
yeah.
and so many fall
Yep.
through the cracks.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I was fascinated with you is that you were invited to give a talk at the National Youth Commission last year. Now, that was about investigating schoolwork transitions for young people. But what the talk that you gave, I
Yep.
read the transcript of that, and it actually blew me away that you had this great vision. Because a lot of people, they go, this is what's wrong with it. But not many people go, well, how can we move forward from that? What is another model that we can
Mm,
actually look at? And that's why I was really impressed with. But one of the stats that you mentioned in the actual talk was that only 26% of ATAR students actually, well, actually at university have come from ATAR. So 26% of students at university have
yeah.
actually come directly from an ATAR school. And I'm just
That's
going,
right.
that sort of then has two things: that the entire school system from kindergarten through to year 12 is basically designed to get you to university. But if only 26% of people there have got there, then what's happened to the rest? Where have they gone? If you know
Yeah.
what I mean. And
Yeah.
then
And that
why
was
are we
one of the
still
points
using
I
such
made.
an antiquated system?
Yeah. That was one of the points I made in that talk, was that the system that we're working within at the moment actually doesn't represent the needs of 75% of students working on that statistic, and it's I think it's 26.3 or something, but I rounded it off.
Yeah, I feel like a good rounding off.
Yeah, look, yeah. Why are we still working in that system? That system is easy. Um, if you have to individualise your delivery and your curriculum to every student you teach. I'm in a really lucky situation at the moment. Indie School's really small and I teach a small number of students, so I can individualise.
Mm.
But, at the height of my mainstream teaching education, before I was in an admin kind of role where I was out of the classroom a lot, I sometimes taught 120 or 130 students a year.
Wow.
And so how do you individualise a curriculum for 120 kids and then support that? And the situation teachers are working in at the moment in the COVID-19 kind of landscape, that sort of pre-return to school landscape, there was a lot more individualisation, and teachers are finding it, it's a massive workload because, there's so much chasing up to do with students. We simply can't do that with every student. Most mainstream schools are quite large. I was lucky enough to work in small schools of sort of 350 kids, but most are, over 1,000 students. You can't individualise the curriculum or the delivery model. That's why the machine exists. It's mass. It's a factory.
Mass production. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm going to quote you. At the beginning of your talk, you said, schools today still focus too much on rote learning of content, regurgitation of information, and standardised testing. Now, I can just hear all my teacher friends going, yes, that's true. That is true. How does that conflict then with what parents expect?
Oh, the thing is, look, of course,
I
I'm a
know that's a
parent
big
and a
question,
teacher.
but
Yeah, look, there's a whole bunch of things there. I want to just make the point that even though I'm a secondary teacher, the problem does start in primary school. Standardised testing, which is part of that quote you've just used, starts in year 3. We do
NAPLAN.
NAPLAN in year 3, 5, 7 and 9.
Mm.
Year 3 students years old, and we're putting them into these, standardised testing kind of models, and it's stressful, and they struggle to cope with that. In terms of parent expectations, I think that's a tricky one. The reality is that parents just the majority of parents want what is best for their children.
Mm.
And one of the difficult things about education, about being a teacher, is that education actually, it changes slowly, but it actually changes quickly as well. And so, you mentioned in the intro that we went to high school together. Schools don't work the same way now that they did when we were in high school, but they actually do as well. And so that kind of confusion of it's a bit the same and a bit not means that parents nowadays who, they base their assumption about what's happening in schools often on their own experience, and that's right and that's not right. And so if their experience was a terrible negative experience, then they're going to carry that with them to their experience of their child's education.
Yep.
If their experience was a fantastic one, they're strong academically and so on, they can actually really struggle to understand academic issues their child might be having. So the parents' experience of school is a really important factor in how they cope with their child's experience of school. In terms of how that fits in with the machine, I don't know, but there is that issue of there being some things that are the same still and things that are vastly different.
I know I get called out on that because I even with you sometimes I've spoken about how education system is still just like it was when I was there, heaven forbid 30 years ago, whenever that was, and it was just boring. I was disengaged. It didn't allow for any free, even interest, anything to be mildly interesting that would go, what can pique my curiosity? What can lead me down another path to make me go, okay, well, this looks like fun. Let's go here. And I keep saying, well, it must be the same, because I keep getting the thing from teachers going, it's just so many people fall through the cracks still. But then again, other people coming, no, there's different programs now. There's the VAT stuff that students can go down that path. They can go down that path. But I think one of the things that you make in your talk is that that's all well and good, but it still is such a strong focus on getting your ATAR and the pressure of getting ATAR and this one set of exams that we all know the stress of year 12 and doing those exams. And kids have been told, if you don't make these exams, if you don't pass these, that's the end. Really, you're going to be, being a garbage driver, garbage truck driver or something like. Mind you, they earn pretty good money. I
was going to say, it's not a bad job. They knock off
I know.
early.
And that's the thing. And that's one of the things that you were talking about. It's sort of, why do we put so much emphasis on this one set of testing? And as you said, testing all the way through high school, when a lot of kids, it's not about testing. Their brains work differently. And then suddenly you give them a test and they all turn to mush. And I know that's what happened with me. It's like, oh, don't test me. Ask me a question outside of the pressure of a test and I might be able to give you an answer. And I just think differently. So, and I think you've come up with a set of sort of, actually, no, before I'm going to go to that, I'm going to talk about the future of where we are going. Because one of the things you talked about is that a lot of the education is based on the past models. This worked, that worked, why change it? It's easy, we can implement it. And it's we just need a cookie cutter thing just to keep people churning out into work.
And we know it.
Going. Sorry?
Yeah. You've hit the nail on the head there. And this is one of the big things, is that the concept of education is too closely linked with the economy. And I get why it is. It requires money to operate. But the whole concept of education being based around that score, that university entry, is actually about training children for jobs. Really, it's and university education. It's not about learning for the sake of learning. It's not about learning how to learn or how to think or how to be human. It's about learning how to do a particular job. And on some level, I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because it's as you said, if you're just learning to get a job, you're going to despise the whole learning process. You're just going to reject anything that, oh, I have to learn this. I'm not, well, learning wasn't a good experience for me. I don't want to learn anything. But it's also the future that, like, say you look at the kids that you're teaching now, or the kids that are in primary school that I go talk to, in 20 years' time, even 10 years' time, the whole world's going to be completely different with AI, machine learning, with automation. Half of these jobs, I don't know why. Tell me off here. Why are we teaching coding in primary schools when AI can do it anyway? I don't get that.
Look, IT as a subject, whether it be coding or all sorts of things, were introduced so late. The Australian curriculum's been, being implemented for since John Howard was Prime Minister.
Yep.
And IT was among the last subjects to be properly implemented, even though, with technological advancements, young people were way more tech savvy than, and that's why, because young people were more tech savvy than adults. Adults are doing the teaching. How can we teach it if we don't know it ourselves?
Yep.
So that was actually some of the problem there. There's a lot of statistics that get bounced around about employment in the future. One that I've read a lot is that 85% of the jobs that kids will be doing by 2030 or thereabouts haven't been invented yet. Now, I'm sceptical about that statistic. How the hell do you come up with it to start with? But even if you question the statistic, what we do know is that silos or sets of information are, becoming, well, they're too singular. They train, and this is why, learning to be a one thing, studying at uni or in a vet program for one sort of job and not for sort of complex thinking, it doesn't enable you to actually, change what you're doing easily either. Another sort of stat to throw out there is that, apparently we change career paths 3 or 4 times in our lifetime. So if you train specifically to be a such and such, you change your mind, you've got to train to be something else. Wouldn't it be better if we actually taught how to think instead? If we were,
yes,
and the future planning of future-focused education, and a lot of the research being done in that area, looks at the fact that it's not about content, and this is probably where one of the issues becomes. Education that's based on content requires you to remember a set of information. Education that's based on skills is far more adaptable. For example, problem-solving skills, they're a mathematical something, but they're actually also used a lot in areas like social work, in psychology. Problem-solving skills, how to actually workshop through a problem, something you can teach across multiple areas and enable people to shift in their lifetime to different career paths. But our current education system isn't set up like that. Interestingly, Scandinavian countries do a lot of education like that. They do very, they don't, not all of them. There are some Scandinavian countries, I wish I'd looked this up before we started the interview. I think Finland's one of them.
Isn't Denmark always quoted as being one of
Denmark, perhaps, yeah. I'd actually have to go back and have a look to remember specifically, but there are some Scandinavian countries that have actually let go of discrete subjects. So they no longer teach maths, English, etc., just as a discrete subject. Instead, they teach sort of cross-curricular programs that touch on those subjects, and they're life-based cross-curricular programs. And so those sorts of ways or models of teaching, they help develop those problem-solving skills and the creative thinking and the lateral thinking and the emotional intelligence that we need in society.
I was going to say, they also teach the interconnectedness of so many subjects and so many topics, and how they all could be applied between maths, between writing a checkbook to Well, who has a checkbook these days? Josh, gee whiz. But
no one has checkbooks anymore.
I saw a check. Someone put up a check on Facebook this morning. I'm going, I have not seen a check in years. And but the interrelationship between all these things and how they can be applied practically, and as what you said, emotional intelligence, understand your emotions, how you are going to overcome situations. This whole resilience thing that I keep banging on about.
Yes.
When things don't go right, how can you quickly adapt and see possibilities and see other entry levels into doing other things or seeing problems differently? And but I think that to shift to that kind of thinking is essential, because I think the future is going to need that. I mean, obviously at the moment, this whole COVID-19 pandemic thing has taught everyone we must be more adaptable. And I'm watching people over the whole thing freak out at the beginning, gently stop the freak out, and now there's an adaptation coming into play.
Yep.
And if we could look back and go, okay, how did we do this? How did we learn from this? And then apply those techniques into the rest of our lives, will be beneficial. But getting back to the education system is, how do you then shift? How do you then implement these? I think are they called soft skills? Which I don't like that term.
They are very facetiously referred to as soft skills. They are, yes.
It just they should be courageous skills.
Yeah, that's part of the, it is partly about the language that's used. And, as long as our system relies on an ATAR, and as long as it's organised around an ATAR, those soft skills are never going to be privileged within the education system, because, you've got to get your maths and your English and you've got to get that number.
Yeah.
So it does require a complete system shift. And the thing is that you asked about parents a little while ago, and parents, the most precious thing to them is their children. And to completely shift our education system to a model that they're not familiar with requires an enormous amount of bravery from parents, because they're trusting their most preciess thing to this new untested system. I can understand
as well.
why. Yep. But that whole idea of, if you haven't succeeded with that number by the end of high school, your life's over. It's just ridiculous, because I've watched so many young people over the years who actually, they find their feet afterwards. They struggled through high school and they find their feet later. That it might be just because they find what they like. It might be because, their maturity kicks in. It's for any number of reasons. It might be because whatever was holding them back, they've learned to cope with or got some help with or whatever. There's a multitude of reasons. But, young people who finish school thinking, wow, what am I going to do because I didn't get the number I wanted, will often end up doing so much, with their lives, despite that. And in fact, I've watched young people who got the number, who worked their butt off, who lived and breathed the stress that comes with that and came out the other end with a positive number, who then ended up going, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do, in fact, a number of years ago, one of my very favourite students, teachers don't have favourites.
No, I won't tell anyone.
No. I was his English teacher up till year 10 or 11. I can't remember if it was 10 or 11, but I wasn't his English teacher in year 12. But he used to come to me still for tutoring after school, informally, because he understood the way I approached things and I knew how to explain them in a way that he got, and all that sort of stuff. And he was really terribly stressed about his English ATAR exams, because he just, he had found it hard all the way through. And he ended up actually blitzing his exams, and his family wanted him to go to uni and do law because he'd done so well. He went and did, actually he started teaching, but he didn't continue in teaching. He ended up going and doing a different degree that was very community. I want to be careful just in case he ever sees this or his family ever, I don't want to be able to, have him clearly picked out. But he ended up doing something that was very community focused and actually community development focused.
Yes.
He could have done anything with the ATAR he ended up with, and instead he went with something that he found joy with, which was fantastic.
That filled him here.
And that's what, yeah.
I mean, look, both you and I know grown adults now who have gone through high school, back when we were in high school, they went to university and they've got their dream career job. And I know some of them, and they look back and go, yeah, but was I happy? Yeah, I made a lot of money. Yeah, I had to raise a family. But when I look back, am I really doing something that fills me up? And a lot of them just go, no. They may just.
That's why we change careers.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like all this stress from earlier on in life just to get to that one point when it's almost like there's that one point, but the whole world is right around that. The world of life, the world of experience.
Well, the flip side of that, of course, is there's no reason why they couldn't have still reached that measure of success and done that job and lived that same life with less stress and a different pathway.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
There are plenty of people who, 74% of people in university via a different pathway who can still study law, medicine, whatever, depending on how hard they work, who haven't necessarily placed themselves in that same level of stress at a high school level.
My husband, Andy, perfect example, goes back to university at the age of 50, brilliant. I mean, because he's there because he wants to be there. It's not because the obligation, the stress, this is what I have to do, this is where I have to go, I have to. And if you really ask yourself the question, do I want to? But when he goes, a lot of these people, the mature age students, they've chosen to go to university and they usually are more successful and more happy with their career afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you look at universities, early universities, not necessarily in Australia, but in England, for example, where they went to study, it was general study. It wasn't, they were studying literature, for example. There's not enough literature teacher jobs out there for university degrees in literature to be work focused. They were for joy. They were for critical thinking. They were for becoming a rounded person. And a mature age student is able to, have that type of experience of university, I guess, because, they've got the life experience to perhaps chill and be a bit more mellow. They have the life, they've got probably some money behind them. They're not in the stressed, I've got to get out there and work kind of state of mind that young people are, and so on.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And, I want to just, it doesn't necessarily fit into this part of our conversation, but parent expectations are such a critical thing as well. And I've experienced some incredibly supportive parents who just want their children to succeed at whatever they're happy with. But I've also I've sat in an office with a kid who is failing, making choices for year 11 subjects and choosing, your physics and your chem and your maths specialist and English lit and all this sort of stuff. And I'm saying to him, but wait a minute, drama's what you love. Where's the drama, because I watch you in your drama classes and you just live that stuff. Where's the music? This is the stuff I see you finding your joy in. And that child's response is, no, Dad says I have to study these to get a good ATAR. And I'm saying to him, you're not going to get a good ATAR with those because you're failing science.
So
doing
did you
that
have
set
the
of
conversation
subjects,
with the father?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. But, if they push it, and in this particular case they did, that student was enrolled in those subjects, he did halfway into his year 11 change. Not all of those subjects, but some of them dropped some to pick up some far more sensible subjects for him that did, ATAR drama was still going to give him a good score, a better score, because he loved it.
Yep.
But that parent expectation, that's what you do, that's how you succeed, that's how you get the number that gets you where you're going to go.
Mm, mm. I can imagine it'll be hard for parents. Now, look, I just want to touch on one. We're going to wrap up shortly. One little
Hmm.
thing that you proposed as a new way of looking at ATAR. You're sort of looking at, instead of having just one set of exams that we all reach for, let's do something different. Can you briefly explain what that different thing was or is?
Yeah, sure. And this is not necessarily a new concept because this is already done in universities. Some of that 74% of kids who get into uni by some other means have got there via portfolio entry or various other entries, bridging courses, for example. So, I think that we should be scrapping the ATAR completely.
Mm,
Um, it's it's a system that places enormous pressure on students for the 2 years of year 11 and 12. And what it comes down to predominantly is that one set of exams at the end of year 12. And if they stuff them up, that's their education gone right there.
mm,
And that places just untold pressure on those young people. And it also, it devalues all of the other 13 years of their education or 12 years of their education because none of those skills that they've learned across the way, you can teach a kid who actually did really well in English and were fantastic, got a great mark, but somehow they bombed their exam and they failed. And you're like, wait a minute, what they've demonstrated they can do over a period of time doesn't match what they can do
mm,
in
mm.
in an exam situation. And that's not for every kid. That's just some of them. But the pressure it takes to actually hit that number is incredibly high. I think we should be scrapping the ATAR. Universities should be, and a lot of unis in America do it this way. Look at other forms of entry. Look at portfolio or interview or audition entry, depending on the course. It would be dependent on course if you're doing. And in fact, if you're going to into a drama course, WAPA, for example, there's an ATAR component, but there's actually also a performance component
Yep.
or audition component to
Mm.
that. So if we shifted to those types of things, I think that it would actually mean that we could shift the way education was experienced through school for all the other years. And I actually think it would lead to more successful university students as well. I did a training, an English workshop one time with, that was, the guy leading it was, he had written the very early general English courses in the WA system. And he was a university lecturer now, and he was talking about university stats that look at the success of university students in their first year of study.
Mm.
And he was comparing students who'd come in via high school directly with an ATAR and students who'd come in having done a 6-month bridging course at university first. And he said the success rates of those students who entered via a bridging course were far higher, and the more of those students stayed in uni, more remained and saw
I'm not
their
surprised.
degree through.
Yeah.
Well, those courses teach students how to study at a university level. They teach them how to think and research and yada yada. But, high school studies teach you how to get a good ATAR. Everything's centred around.
And that's the point. I think that's what you're making, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. And it seems obvious from people standing from the outside, but it's just the alternatives. A lot of like a parent sitting at home go, I don't know what the alternative is. Let's just stick with what we've got. That's the only way forward, yada, yada, yada. But it's like, no,
Yep.
if we just sit back and look at what there is,
Yep.
might be able to change the system.
It's an easy way to do it. The ATAR system is a ranking system. The better you do, the better course you have access to. And I understand on one level, and on one level I see that it's, absolutely. You want students who are highly capable doing, studying medicine, studying psychology, those sorts of areas. But at the same time, getting a low ATAR doesn't mean you wouldn't be capable of studying at that high level. It just means that, it might, but it might also mean you just stuffed up your ATAR.
Yeah, no, exactly. It labels you. It labels you too badly for that one moment when it's
Yeah.
irrelevant. It's not respective of what you're actually fully capable of.
Yes, and that labelling is an important point because, kids will talk about, you've got your ATAR kids and your non-ATAR kids, and your non-ATAR kids will often talk about themselves as being the dumb kids. And
Yeah, I
I
know.
hate that. I absolutely hate it.
I know. Look, even when we were going through high school, are you doing TE subjects? No. Well, what are you in high school for? You don't know. That was the whole point, was to go through to do your TE back
Yep.
1,000 years ago.
People would, people would facetiously refer to spacco maths, for example. Very politically incorrect.
Maths.
That very
great.
I think I sat beside you in the class. But that's life maths. That's that's maths we use every day.
Really, really important.
Whereas absolutely.
Now I'm gonna wrap it up. One last question, Tracey. I'll ask this to everyone. Okay,
I'm not looking forward to this question.
As an educator, as a mum, what is the most important thing that we should focus on, that we should remember about life? Okay,
I've been thinking about this one all day because I actually watched your last interview this morning, your interview with, I've forgotten the lady's name, excellent interview. And I'm going to go with the thing I said at the end of the video to the Year 12 graduating students in my last year at St George's at the end of 2018. A lot of those kids I'd taught since they were started at school with us. And I'm going to say that the most important thing is do what makes you happy.
Do what lights you up here. Do what fills your cup. Yep.
Absolutely.
We just know too many adults who haven't done that. And, the rates of mental illness, depression, suicide, anxiety, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Totally.
And, some people look at that as a concept and they say, oh, no, but that's selfish. You can't do that. But actually, the fact that we are social beings and we love the people in our lives and so on automatically means that doing what makes us happy isn't going to be selfish, because it's not going to make me happy if it's going to make someone else miserable. Exactly. But at the same time, it's about privileging yourself.
If you're happy doing what you enjoy doing, you are because you're happy, you're going to make other people happy because you're not being a grumpy pants. And B, you can inspire other people to do what makes them happy. So it's a win-win for everyone.
That's right. Yeah,
Tracey Jacobsen.
And I think that
I was going to say, I'm going to wrap it up.
Let me just say that be happy thing, that's not just the big things, that's the little things as well. That's, you want to sit and read a book instead of doing the housework, do that. It's every little aspect of life.
I like that. Tracey, thank you so much for joining me on my little chat show. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
I hope that you've got to know me, Josh.
I have certainly got to know you a little bit more. Thank you, Tracey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching the latest episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. If you want to watch more videos, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, follow me on Facebook and Instagram. All the links are on my website, joshlangley.com.au, and that's where you can also get my books for kids to help them make themselves feel good about who they are. I'm about helping kids make friends with themselves, because that's what we all should be doing. And when we make friends with ourselves, we hopefully make friends with everyone else, and the world's a much better place. Thank you very much for watching.